Hello and welcome. Today we are talking about the oil revenue management in Ghana. Now in March 2011, the law was passed, or an act was passed, Act 851, which basically is how do we manage the revenue from our oil resources. Now you all know that when it comes to oil, then the nation is at stake. Posterity, born and unborn, everybody is at stake because it's such a national asset where everybody wants a stake in it. And in order to ensure transparency, fairness and equity, the state, Ghana, has passed a law to make sure that the money is dispersed equitably. Now, you may think, why are we even discussing this now? Many countries who found oil far before us don't even have these laws. However, which means we are far ahead. But there are still some niggly bits that has to be done. And for that, I have in the studio Mohammed Amin Adam, who's Executive Director for Africa Center for Energy Policy, to come and educate me on what this whole idea is about. How will it benefit you, myself, and posterity, if I may say. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to have an education on oil revenue management right after the break. Hello, and the issue is managing our oil revenue. And I think it's a very relevant, credible, and necessary discussion all day long. Why? Because oil is such a national asset. Many countries, this product has brought upon them absolute curse, where they were absolutely fine until they find oil. Other countries had booming sectors, maybe agricultural, maybe industrial, and then as soon as the oil comes, there's so much hope and faith in this area, and then all breaks loose. And Ghana is trying so hard not to get this curse. And it's a good cause, and I think we pat ourselves on the back. So let me say welcome, Mohammed.
Thank you, Nana.
And
I'm very happy to be on this program with you.
I'm glad that I got a good teacher today. Mohammed, let's go back to Act 851, which is a law passed literally to look at how our oil money is dispersed. I mean, it's a good thing, and what's wrong with it?
Yeah, I think that, as you rightly said, most countries approached the use of oil resources without any comprehensive institutional framework, legal framework to guide how they invest the resources. And so the result has been poor management of their resources, as reflected in increasing poverty, in some cases civil strife, conflict, corruption, and rent-seeking behavior. And some have suffered what we call Dutch disease, which you also explain in simple terms. You know, they have the manufacturing, industrial sector or agricultural sector, but as soon as they discover a new resource, such as oil, the concentration moves there. Even the best, resources in terms of labor moves there. Capital moves there. And all the other traditional sectors suffer, and this is what we call the Dutch disease. Okay? And so if you have these resources endowed in your country, and you are not able to manage the resources well, you may fall victim of what we call the resource curse. But let me say that the resources itself cannot be called a curse. It is how you manage the resources that make it a curse or a blessing, which means that the management of natural resources, oil resources, depend on the legal frameworks you put in place, the institutional framework you put in place, the discipline, through your national development plan, the discipline through your investment management plan, so that you can have value for money when you apply these resources to investment. How you put all these things in place and how you religiously follow it, is what determines whether the resource can be a burden on your country, in which case a curse, or it can contribute to accelerated development of your country, in which case a blessing. And so in order to avoid the curse and then translate oil and gas resources to a blessing for our people, the government of Ghana decided to pass this law to develop the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, which was passed by Parliament. And if you look at the law, the objectives for managing our oil revenues are basically three. to contribute to the rate of economic growth, to support the national currency, and then to undertake even imbalanced development of our country. So laudable, okay? And this is why our law is seen to be one of the best, because it provides some clarity in terms of where we are and where we want to go with our oil. And so throughout the world, Ghana's law is being cited. The other side, which is which made Ghana the toast of the world, is the transparency, the extensive transparency and accountability mechanisms we have in that law, which requires the minister to publish how much oil we produce, how much money we are getting. And if you have been following the budget statement for the last 3 years, you will notice that the minister has been publishing our oil receipts, 444 million in 2011, about 541 million in 2012, 770 million in 2013. But for transparency, I will not be able to know how much oil revenues we are receiving. And so because of that transparency and accountability provisions in the law, including the establishment of what we call the Public Interest and Accountability Committee. This is a committee which doesn't have government representation on it. It's citizens groups, the GBA, the House of Chiefs, civil society.
I'm going to come to that.
Yes.
But you cited something very interesting, as in we made about 400 million, 500 million, then 700 million. Yeah. And here we are trying to pass a law in how to manage it. So I'm going to take a quick break. But when I come back, how do we know how much we're going to get next year to know how much we're going to plan and not to plan? I want to find out that. Stay tuned. Well, the education still continues. Now, Mohammed Amin, you mentioned, about the transparency and how good it is. You've also told us that one of the purposes of the Act is so that we can use the money to balance development. Now, normally, if the finance minister is going to come and budget, obviously he's guessing that, well, this year I'm going to make X amount of money so I can do maybe 2 kilometers of road and stuff like that. And therefore you are saying that, 400 million, 500 million, 700 million. So the next year, do we have to budget less because we're going down? Do we have to budget more? We're going up. And who does that estimation?
Yes, that is, I think, one of the issues well defined in the law, but which is not being implemented well, necessitating the review process, which has been set in motion by the Ministry of Finance. Because the law says that...
Let me acknowledge James Kluche Aveji, who's Chairman of Finance Committee of Parliament. Hello, sir.
Hello.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Your line is very faint. If something can be done about it, that would be great.
Okay. I'll get technical team. I'm sure they're listening to me and they do something. But I'm going to let Mohammed finish his point and then you come in.
Okay.
Good. Mohammed, so...
Yes. The law defines how crude oil prices be estimated and how oil production volume be estimated. Crude oil prices are based on what we call 7-year moving average prices of oil. 3 years back, the current year, and the next 3 years estimated prices. When you take an average, a moving average of that, the result you get should be the reference price for determining how much oil revenues we will get. And then if you multiply that by the production volume, which is also estimated, then you will know how much oil revenues we are expecting in a year. Okay. So this is how it is estimated. But once the estimate is done, the minister must be able to distribute these revenues between what goes for the GMPC's investment, their equity investment in existing oil and gas projects which are contributing to these revenues, and then what we call the benchmark revenue. And so once the benchmark revenue is determined, the minister is required to hire an independent certifier who will then review the terms of the estimation and to determine whether the minister did it well or not. The reason behind this is credibility, because ministers of finance always want room to spend. And so when you give them the opportunity to estimate, they estimate in such a way that there will be room for them to spend in the budget. And so the law anticipated this and put it in the law that there should be an independent certifier who will look at the benchmark and then can't pass a judgment as to whether this was politically motivated to meet political objectives or the estimation was done properly. But there are two issues here when it comes to the estimation. And here I want to be practical. In 2011 and 2012, the estimates we did not collect revenues to those estimates. We collected revenues below our estimated targets, which means that...
That's in 2012?
Yes, 2011 and 2012. Which means that if you don't collect what you expected to collect in a year, we have two petroleum funds, the Ghana Stabilization Fund and the Ghana Heritage Fund. And you transfer oil revenues to this fund after you have collected the full potential, the full estimates of what we call the annual budget funding amount.
So let's break it down. Let's say we estimated to get $1 million a year.
Yes.
So we have to get that $1 million before we transfer to the Heritage Fund and the Stabilization Fund.
Let me put it this way. We are expecting 1 million in a year. The minister is going to take out part of it to the GMPC for their equity financing. Now, what is left is called benchmark revenue. Now, this benchmark revenue is further distributed between the budget, what goes to the budget to finance development projects, and what go to the two petroleum funds, the Stabilization Fund and the Heritage Fund. And so if you take out what is allocated to the GNPC, what is left must be certified by an independent certifier, because that is the benchmark revenue. Now, you know how much you are to put in the budget for the year. But if at the end of every quarter, assuming the annual estimate of what will go to the budget is divided on quarterly basis, and you don't collect what is estimated for that quarter, it means that no money will be transferred to the petroleum funds. It is only when you collect revenues above the estimated annual budget funding amount that you can have some transfer. So that excess is what goes to the stabilization fund. Now, the stabilization fund is a fund which is set up, to cushion the budget against price fluctuation. Because crude oil prices are not permanent. They rise and fall. And so if you budgeted to collect a certain amount of money, but price suffers, you will not meet that target. And therefore, you will go to the stabilization fund to withdraw money to fill in the gap. Then the Heritage Fund, also called Future Generations Fund, is an endowment fund which we are not supposed to spend until the oil runs out, so that future generations are also entitled to proceeds from the sale of oil. That fund, as I said, is also put aside. But if you cannot collect the full estimates of the annual budget funding amount for the quarter, then there is no excess. And so no money goes to the stabilization, no money goes to the heritage. This is why we're saying that when you overestimate, and you are unable to collect,
there should be another formula to disperse the money.
Otherwise, there will not be any money going to these funds.
Let me speak to James Aveji, who's chairman for Finance Committee of Parliament. James, hello.
Hello.
Did you get the point that Mohammed just made with regards to disbursement of the money?
Yes, I got a point he made.
So is there a new formula in place so that the Heritage Fund would by all means get something, or how are we working it?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
How are you, sir? Honorable.
I'm fine.
Yes. I thought you were traveling.
Yes, I followed the point that Amin is raising. The idea behind the estimation of the benchmark revenue is for us to have a precise and concrete figure which we can use in budgeting. If that is not the case, we would have said we are not going to estimate any revenue at all for the petroleum. Whatever comes to the year is shared between annual budget funding amount, we take 70%, and stabilization fund put together, and heritage fund take the 30%. But because we wanted a yardstick to which we will measure, and then also to know how much is coming into the budget, that is why the benchmark revenue comes in. Now we are saying that the benchmark revenue, it's derived by getting the total revenue that is coming from the petroleum sales, net of the equity financing cost. Then you derive the revenue. That benchmark revenue then is paid into Petroleum Holding Fund and disbursed or transferred according to the law. 70% go to the budget to support the budget called annual budget funding amount, and 30% go to both stabilization and heritage, which is also divided between the two of them 70-30 in favor of stabilization.
Okay.
Now, the point that Amit is making is that in situations where there is overestimation, in that case, by the time you have gotten the annual budget funding amount, nothing will be left for heritage and stabilization fund. The same thing applies where there is underestimation. Enough is then sent into stabilization and heritage fund. The point that we should be talking about now is that how do we come out with a formula that at the end will have near to 100% estimation? Because now, as we started, Ghana has never experienced this situation. We just started producing oil. We do not have any historical data that will assist us in coming out with a more reliable formula in estimating the benchmark revenue. Now, in terms of volume, it is to be difficult for you to estimate how much volume you're going to get from production. Mm-hmm. If something happens during the course of the year and you cannot even produce that quantity you think you can produce a day, it will have effect on the benchmark revenue or total volume of sales. At the same time, it could happen that you estimate and at the end, production will be good and therefore you produce more. So my position, what I am thinking is that we should, as a matter of country, see, let's have input from all interested groups, the civil society, and how we can estimate the benchmark revenue in terms of the quantity. That is the more volume, that is more important, because in terms of the price, it will be easy to determine the price if we want to use the world market price.
James, let me come in here from a layman's point of view. I mean, if we share this money in percentages, even if we make 10 cedis 1 year from oil, you give 7 cedis to the finance minister, and then share 1 cedi 50 pesos among the the other two funds, which is 1 cedi 50 pesos here. So
you are right. You are right. That is, if you estimate that you are going to get 10 cedis in a year, then at the end of the year, you got exactly the 10 cedis. 70 will go into the budget. 30 will be shared between stabilization and heritage.
No, I'm sorry. I'm not talking about the amount you get. I am just saying that could there be a formula that says whatever amount we get after GMPC have taken theirs, 70% of whatever is left goes to the finance minister, and then the 30% is shared 70-30 against the other fund, so that we don't panic. We know that if we get 1 million, well, we have 700,000 to share. If we have 100,000, we have 70,000 to share. I mean, can it work like that?
No, that is how the formula is. But the formula again realizes that we might not have 100% situation. We might have a situation which will be more than 100%, or a situation that will be less than 100%. And we are saying that in order not to distort the budget for the year, in the situations where we have less than the 100 as we estimated, we have to satisfy the amount of money based on the benchmark revenue that should have gone into the annual budget funding amount. After that, whatever is left is given to stabilization and heritage.
Let me come in again before I bring James. In any case, once upon a time, we did not even have oil, and we were surviving. So why are we, becoming so hard and saying that whatever happens, we need to give to the budget? Because when the oil...
Because you use the benchmark revenue in your budget. You say that based on the benchmark revenue, I'm collecting 500 million for petroleum. Okay. You have used that one in doing all your mathematics.
Okay.
So we want to be sure, because we want a situation where we will not pump in more money into the budget in order to have what we call the dark disease. At the same time, we don't want to save in more than necessary, wherever we will have have effect on our development project. That is the reason why we have the stabilization fund. So what we are saying is that, fine, if after the equity financing cost is taken by GNPC, let's assume what is left is 100. 70 will go to the budget, 30 will go to stabilization, and then heritage. But in a situation where after the GNP has taken their share, and what you have is only 80, still 70 must go into the budget, and 10 is shared between stabilization and heritage. And then the third situation is that where after the GNPC has taken their share and what is left is 120, still it is only 70 that will go into the budget. The remaining 50 will go to stabilization and heritage. That is the situation. In order to stabilize the economy, that is a principle.
Let me bring Mohammed in here. I mean,
I think that the reason you have a stabilization fund and then the budget is because the fluctuating crude oil prices can introduce what we call cyclicality into the budget and the economy, rising and falling prices. And therefore, to address that and the effects on the economy, you usually will have what we call counter-cyclical instruments or measures. And so the stabilization fund is a counter-cyclical measure, such that when you estimate and you don't realize the full estimate, then you can go to the stabilization fund to fill in the gap so that there is budget smoothing. Okay, and therefore the cyclicality doesn't arise in the budget, which will affect planned projects or planned spending. But the issue is the accuracy of the estimation. Because somebody can argue that if the minister overestimates and is not able to collect what is estimated, the law conveniently allows the minister to go to the stabilization fund and draw the money. But you see, if the stabilization fund is to perform that cyclical, counter-cyclical duty, the balance in the stabilization fund should be liquid. That fund should be liquid at all times, such that when you want the money, you can go and take it. This is why Nigeria, for instance, they just set up what we call a sovereign wealth fund, which has a counter-cyclical objective. And they decided to put money in it. And they said they won't touch that money until 5 years, when the balance in the stabilization fund grows. And they know that after removing some money from the stabilization fund to smoothing the budget, there will still be liquidity in the stabilization fund. Our case doesn't have that. So tomorrow, even though we have been managing oil revenues for 3 years, tomorrow, if we fall short of our annual budget funding estimate, we have to fall on the stabilization fund, even though what is in the stabilization fund today is not sufficient. Okay? And so the issue we have to address is how accurate will our estimates be, or near accurate will our estimates be. If we don't do that, then we will always be depleting the stabilization fund even before it becomes liquid. Now, the other, problem has to do with the heritage fund. Because if we don't realize our estimate and the heritage fund doesn't also receive money, not only the stabilization fund, it means that the future fund we want to set up to serve the interests of future generations will also not grow. And this is why the accuracy of the estimation is important. Now, there is a new thing the minister has done, which is also consistent with the law. The law says that the minister should put a maximum cap on the stabilization fund. And when that cap is reached, even if we have excess revenue over what we need to put in the budget, that excess will no longer go to the stabilization fund. It will be used for debt repayment or put into a new fund called contingency fund. Now, the problem is that the minister can decide to be overly conservative and therefore underestimate. And that was what we saw last year. Because how could the minister have pegged expected prices at $84 per barrel when the ruling price at the time was over $100 per barrel? How could the minister have put expected crude oil volume around 87,000 barrels a day when the Jubilee partners said they were already at 110,000 barrels a day, and they were expecting to reach 120,000 barrels a day in 2014. And so the minister's estimates were not informed by the facts, and therefore he was overly conservative. That accounted for Ghana collecting oil revenues in excess of what we estimated. Now, if you have that situation, and then you have the cap on the stabilization fund, and the cap is filled, the minister will always underestimate, because the excess revenue will go to the contingency fund, which is not governed by the Petroleum Revenue Management Law.
And then you can use it for
how
anything.
you utilize the contingency fund is not governed by the Petroleum Revenue Management Law. And therefore, political discretion comes in. And if it is misused, what do you do? And that is the fear about wrongful estimation. Whether overestimation or underestimation, there is still an issue. And so how we can do accurate estimation. And this requires capacity building. We have not been doing this.
Let me get a response from James on this. James.
Yeah, I think that in the issue about estimation, I think I made that point earlier on that we do not have any historical data in terms of crude oil production. And for that matter, in the beginning or the earlier years of this, we might not have accurate.
James, I agree with you, but when the production managers are already at 100 and saying they are moving to 120, if you peg at 85, then you're a bit low.
Now, let me tell you one thing. Last year, around November, there was no production for 2 weeks. The FPSO must shut down for maintenance. Has factored that into the estimation?
In fact,
so it is not only taking words from the partners that we are producing so much on daily basis, and therefore you multiply it by 360 and then get the value. No. There are other factors that go into that. That is why I agree with that we need to come out with a formula that will let us have an accurate or near accurate estimation. That's one I agree.
Okay.
And for now, we're having this situation because we do not have any historical data that will guide the estimation. So as we are growing, or the years are coming back, we'll definitely perfect the formula in order to have accurate or near accurate estimation. Now, again, if situation right now where we have underestimation, whatever is the excess, go into the stabilization. Now, Amin is making a point that the minister has kept the ceiling now for the stabilization now at 250 million. The excess then go into contingency fund, and therefore, because contingency fund is not controlled by the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, it's having to bring that. No. Let's all say that we, in the Petroleum Revenue Management Law, make that reference in the law that part of those excesses can go into debt servicing and can also go into the contingency fund, which is a creation of the Constitution. And we all know that Constitution is supreme over any other law that we pass in this country. So we are within the law that control or manage the petroleum revenue, as well as the supreme law that governs the country.
Let me correct something. The maintenance Honorable is talking about, on the FPSO was planned maintenance. Even before the year began, they knew that in November they were going to do that maintenance. And so that was factored into the estimation. This is why by the end of 2013, the average was still 110,000 barrels a day. So I'm not wrong about that. Now, but the second issue, which he also talked about, and I think is very important, even though the contingency fund is a creation of the Constitution, why have we not created it? All this while that we have been operating with the 1992 Constitution until oil revenues are coming in. Because conveniently, there is political discretion in how we spend our money. And so ministers will want flexibility,
No,
but we decided that when we passed the Petroleum Revenue Management Law...
It is not the ministers who say we should create that contingency fund.
I didn't say that.
No, he didn't say that.
I didn't say that.
Again, it is not the minister who says that.
I'm going to take a break here, but when I come back, what I need to find out from both gentlemen is, from the layman on the street, I think the oil revenues is being spread too thinly, almost on every single thing. There's a little bit of oil money on agric, a little bit in education. As a nation, do we have priorities that we should say that, listen, let's put all our eggs in this basket and within 5 years it will be sorted and we move on? Stay tuned. Hello and welcome back. Managing our oil revenue is the discussion, and we're looking at the review of Act 851, which basically governs how the money is spent. You know what, I need about 3 hours to really go through all this, but I'm just going to push it as much as I can. And with me on the phone is James Kluche Aveji, who's Chairman of Finance Committee of Parliament. And then with me in studio is Mohammed Amin Adam, Executive Director, Africa Center for Energy Policy. Now, what I want to find out as a state, civil society, and I have, state represented on the phone, are we spending the oil revenue too thinly? Let me start with Mohammed.
Yeah, I mean, this is an issue we have raised, over and over, because if you look at 2011, 2012, and 2013, I mean, I'm particularly worried about 2013. 48 million Ghana cedis, for instance, was allocated to Ghana Highway Authority. That's about $24 million. They spread it over 63 projects, road projects covering 2,124 kilometers. And that gave you an average allocation of about $11,000 per kilometer, while official cost of a kilometer is about $360,000. And so granted that we maintain this rate of disbursement, none of these projects will be completed in 30 years. And that doesn't give us value for money, because these projects are going to suffer, overrun times and overrun cost. I mean, when I say this, people say those roads were also funded by GOG. It's not only oil revenues. But I would like Honorable Aveji to confirm that, because I have seen the budget on those roads, and usually if it is coming from GOG, it is indicated. If it is coming from multiplicity of sources, they are all indicated. But for these particular 63 road projects, the only source I found in the budget was ABFA, the annual budget.
So 63
road projects.
Oh,
okay.
And how many kilometers?
Yeah, 2,124 kilometers. And I'm worried, because there is no way you can complete this project in the next 10, 20 years if we maintain this rate of disbursement. And so spreading thinly across so many projects will not help with the efficiency of spending the money. And this is why I am happy, because the Minister of Finance actually agreed with the concerns we raised. And so in the 2014 budget, he made a categorical statement that the annual budget funding amount will be dedicated to few capital projects for purposes of efficiency and effectiveness. And he has done that because he has divided the money across a few capital projects, specific projects like the landing and fishing sites, the Eastern Corridor Road. These are very specific projects. And I will want to see how we will follow through to completing these projects, and society will begin benefiting, as opposed to the previous practice of spreading too thinly across so many projects that will not be completed within a short period.
James, spreading the money too thinly, we run the risk of not getting anything subsistence. And I even go further to say, can you even push some of that money towards the gas project and get it finished before the CBD loan comes in?
Thank you very much. I think that the issue about spreading the money was something that was foresaw by Parliament. That is why we made it clear that the Minister of Finance, in presenting the budget, must indicate 4 main areas within which the expenditure of petroleum revenue can be made. That is the ADFA. So the Minister actually did that, that 4 category expenditure areas. The issue then is now administrative, no more in terms of whether it is legal or it is wrong or not wrong. Because if the minister indicated that one of the 4 areas is the road infrastructure, and it is approved by Parliament, the minister is at liberty to spend the petroleum revenue on that sector. The issue is raising is that spreading that money thinly will not benefit. And I agree with him. And I agree with him perfectly that once Parliament approved that road infrastructure as one of the 4 categories or areas that he can spend, it is for the minister to limit the number of roads that can be funded from the project so that we can feel the impact of it. That is why Parliament, in the wisdom of Parliament, did that when we're passing the law. So I agree with Amin, and it is for us, all of us, to really educate our people that if government is doing this, it is not that government is denying a community of their share of Ghana revenue for government, but it is for us to feel and have economic value for whatever we're doing. Because most of the time, the communities are putting pressure on government. Everybody wants to have the road at the same time. And that is a pressure on government as well. So I agree with Amin. Let's all fight it and see, educate our people so that the minister can limit the spread of the fund to cover a few of those projects so that we can feel the impact of it.
James, I'll stay with you. In 2011, we had about 400 million. 2012, we got about 500 million. Last year, we got about 700 million, all from oil revenue. We could have finished our gas project and not, wait for CBD loans, which would, go further to help the economy. And the gas will probably come back and pay all this money in the shortest possible time.
I agree with you. That is, if we decide that we use all the revenue into the gas infrastructure development, that is the result we will get. I agree with you in that case. But don't forget that we are spending about $850 million. $850 million for the gas infrastructure.
Yeah.
So if we have 400 plus 500, that gives you 900
plus
another 700, 600. So it's almost around that figure. So if we say that, well, we're going to devote all the petroleum revenue into one project, we will definitely get a result after 2, 3, or 4 years.
And the gas will pay back this money, in no time.
Yes, at the same time, when you take a loan, the gas will pay by itself.
No,
so
but
the issue now is about priority, whether we should send everything into one project or we should spread it. And the law, as we are passing the law, we did not foresee that we need to do this kind of thing that you're talking about. So we gave the minister the opportunity to come with 4 different sectors, which he did. So the minister is not wrong in the first place by spending the money in these 4 sectors.
No.
But the point you are raising now is a different issue. Should we all agree as a country that let's do it the way you said we should do it? If that is the situation, because Amin was even making a proposal that why don't we put every money into the Ghana Infrastructure Fund, which will be set up, and use it for infrastructure development. That is the opinion of Amin.
Yeah.
Is that what everybody is thinking? We need to debate it, and then so that the concepts that underline the passage of the Petroleum Revenue Management Act will change. So that the issue about heritage will not be there, the issue about stabilization will not be there. Whatever comes in, we'll put it into one project, that is Ghana Infrastructure Fund, and use it to develop the country. That is something that we should debate.
I'll bring Amin in here.
I understand, the issue you raised, that when we were passing the law as a country, we didn't even anticipate that we will need to do that project. I think that is fundamentally correct. And the reason we are, having to do things in an ad hoc manner is because we don't have a long-term national development plan. If we have a long-term national development plan, but also an investment, a public investment management plan over a 10-year period, we should know in advance, in 10 years what we want to do with our oil money. Other than that, we are going to be doing this ad hoc, management of our oil revenues. And if we do that, we will not get the benefits from oil. And this is why I think that it's fundamentally a mistake on our part to have started to spend the oil money without a long-term national development plan and without a public investment management plan. What I understand we did was to use the medium-term development plan, the Ghana Shared Growth and Development Agenda. But it's only a 4-year, plan. And therefore, it doesn't look into the future. But if we have a long-term national development plan, we will then spend the money strategically to achieve the objective of our long-term development vision. Other than that, the president goes around the country during campaign. He promises, communities, I'll do this, I'll do that. The oil money is secure money. It will come. Once we produce the oil and sell, the money is assured. Unlike tax, revenues where you have to make extra effort to collect the money. And so it is easier to use the oil money to begin to fulfill those promises because we don't have a long-term national development plan. And I think that it is a mistake on our part. Countries that have not been able to escape the resource curse are countries that manage their oil revenues in an ad hoc manner.
Let me bring James in here. James, should we go back to the drawing board and really put this money in some long-term investments which really yield money?
Well, our constitution mentioned long-term development plan. As a country, we will not be able to come up with one. but we have been running this country based on a medium-term development plan over the years. I think that we should all come together as a people to have a long-term development plan. That is why, because we do not have it, the Constitution, the Petroleum Revenue Management Act says that in the absence of the long-term development plan, the minister should follow this list of items which actually were mentioned in the law. So if the time has come now for all of us are calling for national development plan, I support it fully. Let's come up with that plan that can guide all political parties that will come to power, that we do not manage this country based on manifesto alone, but based on whatever you derive from the national development plan for your manifesto.
James, but one will say at the moment the power is in your hands. You are the majority in parliament. Move it.
Yes. Yeah, we are majority in parliament.
So move the motion.
well, if it's in my hand, I'll consider it. So don't worry, we'll look at what we can do. And I want Amin, who is from the other side, to support me.
He will.
I'm advocating it already, so you have the support.
He will support you. James, thank you very much for that education.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm sure viewers will understand what the whole idea is about. I mean, last thing before we go is how do we police the money and the funding for the institution that police the money? Just briefly before I say.
Yes, I think you are referring to the Public Interest and Accountability Committee. At the moment, the law provides only for allowances paid to members of the committee when they sit at meetings, but it doesn't provide for administrative expenses.
So it all boils down to implementation. Again. I mean, I need to get you back.
I think that they need a dedicated funding mechanism in the law that will seek to support their administrative expenses.
Well, thank you very much. That was Amin Adam, Executive Director, Africa Center for Energy Policy. And we're talking about, obviously, managing our oil resources. Now, again, as I always remind you, Thursday, if you watching it tomorrow, then it will be tomorrow, Thursday, 2 o'clock on Joy FM. Tune in and listen to a show I call That's My Opinion. And I am looking at matrilineal heritage. And it's going to be very controversial because I am saying that, well, for our I'm not going to work because my uncle is alive. Was it really a bad thing that our forefathers instituted? Tune in and listen. It's going to be very exciting. My name is Nanan Sakwa, the fourth. And as I say, tomorrow we'll be back to do it all over again.